Silent town. I always thought our lives were chaotic by choice. I mean, isn't that what we sign up for when we live in the city? My fiancée, Rachel, and I were so accustomed to the noise, the rush, and the suffocating grind that a weekend getaway felt like winning the lottery. We packed our bags on a Friday morning, threw them into the back of my old Chevy Impala, and hit the road, chasing nothing but quiet. The highways stretched endlessly, the miles folding under us like crumpled pages in a book. There was something serene about watching the city dissolve into rolling hills and patches of dense forest. Rachel laughed as she held her hand out of the window, slicing the air like she was conducting some invisible orchestra. It was the kind of moment you wish you could pause and relive forever. But then the car broke down. The sputtering started about 50 miles past a gas station we should have stopped at. I tried to nurse it along, but the engine coughed its final breath near a rusted old road sign that read, "Silent Town, 10 miles. Couldn't have picked a better name?" Rachel muttered, folding her arms as she leaned against the car. The highway stretched in both directions, empty and eerily quiet. No passing cars, not even the faint hum of distant traffic. "Let's walk it," I said, slinging my backpack over my shoulder. 10 miles isn't so bad. Rachel shot me a look but didn't argue. We grabbed a flashlight, just in case, and started down the desolate road. Silent Town didn't look like much at first. A cluster of houses surrounded by tall, swaying trees. An old gas station stood on the edge of the main road, its rusted sign swinging gently in the wind. Across from it was a diner, paint faded, windows dusty, the neon sign above it flickering weakly. "Welcome to the Silent Cafe." Rachel and I exchanged a glance. "This place feels off," she said softly. But we were tired, and our feet ached, so we decided to rest and figure out a way to call for help. The diner door jingled as we pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of burnt coffee and grease. Booths lined the walls, and a long counter stretched across the room, but the place was eerily empty. "Hello," I called out. No answer. A moment later, a man shuffled out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a stained apron. His face was pale, his eyes hollow, and his lips didn't curl into the faintest hint of a smile. "You two need something?" he asked. "Yeah, our car broke down," I said. "Do you have a phone we can use?" The man shook his head. "No phone here. Closest one's at the sheriff's office." "And where's that?" "Down the road," he said, jerking a thumb toward the window. "Can't miss it." Rachel and I thanked him and turned to leave, but as we passed the wall near the door, something caught my eye. Old photographs hung in a crooked line, yellowed with age. At first glance, they seemed normal. Smiling couples, groups of friends, all posing in front of the diner. But then my stomach dropped. "Rachel," I whispered, grabbing her arm. "What?" "Look." I pointed to one of the photos. It was black and white, the edges torn slightly. But the couple in the picture? They looked exactly like us. We bolted out of the diner, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst. "What the hell was that?" Rachel hissed, glancing over her shoulder as we hurried down the road. "I don't know," I said, "but I don't want to stick around to find out." The sheriff's office wasn't far, just a squat brick building with bars on the windows. Inside, the air was musty, and the light buzzed faintly overhead. A lone desk sat in the center, papers strewn across it. "Hello," Rachel called out. A figure emerged from the back room, a woman in a crisp uniform, her face as expressionless as the diner man's. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice flat. "Our car broke down," I said quickly. "We need a phone to call for help." The sheriff tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing. "Where are you two from?" "Chicago," Rachel said. "We were just passing through." "No one just passes through Silent Town," the sheriff interrupted. Her words hung in the air like a storm cloud. I felt a chill creep down my spine. "What does that mean?" She didn't answer. Instead, she turned her attention to a wall behind her desk. It was covered in photographs just like the diner. More couples. More groups of smiling faces. And in the very center was another black and white photo. Rachel and me. What the... Rachel started, but the sheriff cut her off. "You should leave," she said, her tone suddenly sharp. "Yeah, we'd love to," I snapped. "But we need a tow truck." "There's no tow truck," she said. "No way out. You'll see soon enough." Her words hit like a punch to the gut. Rachel grabbed my hand, and we stumbled out of the office, the door slamming shut behind us. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the deserted streets. Silent Town felt even more oppressive in the twilight. The air was thick, suffocating, and the faint hum of something, like static, buzzed at the edge of my hearing. "We have to get out of here," Rachel said, her voice trembling. I nodded, gripping her hand tightly as we headed back toward the diner. Maybe we could find a map, supplies, anything to get us out of this nightmare. But as we approached, I noticed something strange. The photos in the window had changed. The one with Rachel and me was now front and center, but we weren't smiling anymore. Our faces were pale, hollow, just like the people we'd met in the town. Rachel gasped, pulling me back. "What's happening to us?" "I don't know," I said, "but we need to keep moving." The road that had led us into Silent Town now felt foreign, as if it were stretching and twisting under the weight of some unseen force. Rachel and I walked in silence, our ears straining for the sound of anything. A car engine, a bird, even the wind. But there was nothing, just that incessant hum, growing louder with each step. "Wait," Rachel said suddenly, pulling me to a stop. "Did you hear that?" I froze, my breath catching in my throat. At first, there was nothing but the hum. Then, faintly, a whisper. Words I couldn't quite make out, carried on a breeze that shouldn't exist. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice shaking. The whispering stopped. The hum grew louder. "We need to go," Rachel urged, her eyes darting around the darkening street. We quickened our pace, but the road seemed to stretch endlessly ahead. No matter how far we walked, the edge of town remained just out of reach. The buildings loomed over us, their windows dark and lifeless, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement, a shadow darting between two houses. "Did you see that?" Rachel whispered, clutching my arm. I nodded, my mouth dry. "Stay close." We pressed on, our footsteps echoing unnaturally in the empty street. The whispers returned, louder this time, mingling with the hum. They came from all around us, as if the town itself was alive and murmuring secrets we weren't meant to hear. We turned a corner and found ourselves back at the diner. "What the hell?" I muttered, my heart sinking. "We've been walking in circles." Rachel grabbed my hand, her grip tight. "We're trapped," she said, her voice barely audible. "We're not getting out, are we?" I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that we couldn't stop moving. If we stopped, I was certain the town would swallow us whole. Rachel and I stood outside the diner, staring at our own pale, hollow faces in the photograph. The air felt heavier now, pressing down on us as though Silent Town itself disapproved of our presence. The flickering neon sign above the diner cast eerie shadows, and I could swear that the hum, the one I thought was just in my head, was now pulsing through the air. "What do we do?" Rachel whispered. Her voice trembled, and her wide eyes darted from the photo to me, then to the empty street behind us. I forced a deep breath, trying to sound braver than I felt. "We keep moving. The road has to lead somewhere. Maybe we missed a turn." Rachel nodded, clutching my arm tightly. "Let's just go." The road twisted on endlessly, the buildings of Silent Town looming like forgotten memories. Each house was identical. 2 stories, pale paint peeling from the siding, windows that stared like vacant eyes. We passed a church whose bell tower was eerily silent, the door hanging ajar. A playground sat abandoned, its rusting swings creaking softly in a breeze we couldn't feel. "Why does it feel like we're walking in place?" Rachel muttered. I didn't answer, couldn't. The truth was, it did feel like that. My legs ached. My breath came in short bursts. But every step brought us no closer to the edge of town. The hum followed us, growing louder, until it was more like a low drone rattling in my skull. Then, without warning, we saw it. A light. A warm, flickering glow spilling out from a building just ahead. Rachel squeezed my arm. "Someone's home," she said, her voice brimming with hope. "Or something," I muttered, but we had no other choice. The light came from a small house at the end of the street. It was different from the others. Its paint was fresh, its windows clean. Curtains swayed gently in the breeze. Warmth radiated from it, an impossible contrast to the oppressive cold of Silent Town. I knocked on the door. The sound echoed, far louder than it should have. Rachel clutched my arm tighter, and I half expected the door to creak open on its own. But it didn't. A woman answered, her face bright and welcoming, her smile warm and disarming. She looked completely normal, utterly out of place in this strange, frozen town. "Oh, you poor things," she said, ushering us inside. Come in, come in. You must be freezing out there." Rachel hesitated, but I stepped forward. The warmth inside was intoxicating, like stepping out of a snowstorm and into a crackling fire-lit room. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon and wood smoke, and a cozy living room stretched before us. A fire blazed in the hearth, and 2 steaming mugs of something sat waiting on the coffee table. I don't know how to thank you," I stammered, collapsing onto the couch. The woman smiled, settling into an armchair across from us. "No need to thank me. It's not often we get visitors here in Silent Town." Rachel's head snapped up. "You know the name of this place? What is this town? Why are we—" She trailed off, her breath catching in her throat. The woman tilted her head, her smile never faltering. "Oh, you're safe here. Don't worry about that. Silent Town. It's just a place. Quiet little place. But you must be so tired. Why don't you drink?" She gestured to the mugs. "It'll help." Rachel and I exchanged a glance. The woman's presence was comforting, but something about her words set me on edge. "Thank you," I said cautiously, "but we really just need to find a way out of here. Do you have a phone we can use? Or maybe a car?" The woman's expression flickered, just for a moment, before her warm smile returned. "No phones here, but don't worry about leaving. You'll find that it's complicated. Why don't you rest? You look so tired." I stood abruptly, the hair on the back of my neck prickling. "We should go," I said, grabbing Rachel's arm. The woman's smile faded, replaced by something harder, sharper. "You can't leave," she said softly. Rachel gasped. "What do you mean, we can't leave?" "Silent Town doesn't let you leave until it's ready," the woman said, standing slowly. Her eyes darkened, her warm demeanor dissolving. "You shouldn't fight it. It only makes things worse." I didn't wait to hear more. I grabbed Rachel's hand and bolted for the door. But as we reached it, the house shifted. The walls groaned, the floor trembled, and the door vanished, replaced by a solid expanse of wall. "No," Rachel whimpered. "No, no, no." The woman's laughter filled the room, a low, chilling sound that made my stomach churn. "You can run," she said, her voice echoing unnaturally. "But you can't escape. Silent Town. It's already inside you." The hum erupted into a deafening roar, and the room around us dissolved into darkness. When I opened my eyes, I was back on the street. Rachel was beside me, trembling, her face pale and tear-streaked. The woman and her house were gone, replaced by more of Silent Town's endless, empty buildings. The hum had returned to its low, insistent drone, but now it seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat. "What just happened?" Rachel whispered, clutching my arm. "I don't know," I said, "but we have to keep moving. We can't stop." Rachel nodded, her grip tightening. "Okay, let's go." We turned down another street, but the town seemed to shift around us, the buildings blurring and twisting as though we were walking through a mirage. The whispers returned, louder this time, snatches of words and phrases that made no sense. "Why do I feel like we're being watched?" Rachel said, her voice barely audible. I didn't answer. I didn't want to admit that I felt it too. Eyes on us, following us, judging us. The photos in the diner, the ones in the sheriff's office. It was as if Silent Town had been waiting for us all along. Then I saw it. A figure standing at the edge of the shadows. It was too far away to make out details, but it was unmistakably human. Tall, motionless, its head tilted slightly as if observing us. "Do you see that?" I whispered. Rachel nodded, her hand tightening around mine. "It's been following us. I saw it earlier, but I thought I was imagining things." The figure stepped closer, its movements slow and deliberate. I could just make out its face or lack thereof. Its features were smooth and blank, like a mannequin's. Rachel let out a strangled cry, and we turned and ran, our footsteps echoing through the empty streets. The hum grew louder, the whispers turning into a cacophony of voices, all shouting over one another. But no matter how fast we ran, Silent Town followed. Rachel and I staggered through the endless streets of Silent Town, the oppressive hum rattling in our skulls. The faceless figure was always just behind us, its blank visage a taunting reminder that escape might be impossible. My breath came in ragged gasps as my legs threatened to give out, but Rachel's frantic grip on my hand kept me moving. "It's not real," I muttered, trying to convince myself. "It can't be real." "Then why can I feel it?" Rachel hissed, glancing over her shoulder. "Why does it feel like it's inside me?" I didn't have an answer. The whispers, once unintelligible, were forming coherent words now, their fragmented sentences digging into my brain like nails. "Stay. You belong here. Don't fight." "Shut up," I shouted into the void, my voice cracking. But the voices only laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that sent chills down my spine. "Look," Rachel cried, pointing ahead. A building loomed out of the shadows, different from the others. Its walls were blackened and crumbling, and a sign above the door read, "The Hall of Echoes." The door creaked open on its own, revealing nothing but darkness inside. "We're not going in there," Rachel said, digging her heels into the ground. "Do we have a choice?" I asked, glancing back. The faceless figure had stopped at the edge of the street, its featureless head tilting slightly as if daring us to enter. Rachel's hand trembled in mine. "I don't like this." "Neither do I," I admitted. "But we can't just stand here." Reluctantly, we stepped through the doorway. The darkness swallowed us whole, and for a moment, I was certain we had been consumed by Silent Town itself. Then a dim, flickering light appeared, illuminating a long hallway lined with mirrors. The mirrors stretched endlessly on both sides, their surfaces warped and cracked. As we moved deeper into the hall, our reflections twisted unnaturally, our faces stretching into grotesque shapes that didn't feel like our own. "Don't look," Rachel whispered, her voice shaking. "Just keep walking." But I couldn't help it. My gaze was drawn to one of the mirrors, where my reflection stared back at me with wide, terrified eyes. It raised its hand, but I hadn't moved. "Rachel," I said, my voice trembling. "Something's wrong." She turned, and her reflection did the same. But instead of mirroring her fear, it smiled. A slow, menacing grin that didn't belong on Rachel's face. "We need to get out of here," she said, grabbing my arm. As we hurried forward, the mirrors began to shift. The reflections changed, showing us scenes that couldn't possibly be real. Rachel and I sitting in the diner, our faces pale and hollow. The two of us wandering Silent Town, our movements jerky and unnatural, like puppets on strings. And finally, the two of us standing in front of the Hall of Echoes, our blank, faceless heads tilting in unison. "What is this?" Rachel cried, tears streaming down her face. "It's not us," I said, pulling her forward. "It's trying to mess with us." The hallway seemed to stretch on forever, the air growing colder with each step. The whispers returned, louder now, their voices coming from the mirrors themselves. You can't escape. You're already part of it. Accept it. Shut up, I shouted again, slamming my fist against one of the mirrors. The glass shattered, but instead of falling, the shards hung suspended in the air, reflecting countless distorted versions of my face. They whispered in unison, their voices overlapping. Why fight? At the end of the hallway, a door appeared. Unlike the rest of the hall, it was pristine, its surface painted a bright, inviting white. Without hesitation, I pushed it open, pulling Rachel through with me. We stumbled into an open space that seemed to stretch infinitely in all directions. The floor was a smooth, reflective surface, like a black mirror, and the sky above was an endless void. In the center of the space stood a single chair, and sitting in it was me. No, not me. It looked like me, but its skin was pale, its eyes hollow and sunken. It smiled up at us, the same unnerving grin I had seen in the mirror. "Welcome," it said, its voice identical to mine. Rachel shrank back, clutching my arm. "What is this?" The figure stood, its movements slow and deliberate. "This is where it begins," it said, "and where it ends. You can't leave, you know. Silent Town doesn't let its children go." "We're not staying," I said firmly, stepping in front of Rachel. "I don't care what this place is. We'll find a way out." The figure laughed, a hollow, echoing sound. "You still don't understand. You're already part of it. Every step you take, every breath you draw, ties you closer to Silent Town. The only way out is to let go." "Let go of what?" Rachel demanded, her voice breaking. The figure's grin widened. "Yourselves." The ground beneath us began to ripple, the reflective surface distorting like liquid. Shadows rose up from it, taking on familiar shapes. The faceless figure from the street, the woman from the house, the sheriff. They surrounded us, their hollow eyes staring, their whispers growing louder. "Stay. You belong here. Don't fight. Run," I shouted, but there was nowhere to go. The shadows closed in, their forms merging into a swirling mass of darkness that threatened to consume us. Rachel clung to me, her sobs muffled by the deafening roar of the hum. "What do we do?" she cried. I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that we couldn't give in. Not to the town, not to the whispers, and certainly not to the thing that wore my face. Taking a deep breath, I shouted into the void. "We don't belong here. This isn't real." The hum faltered, just for a moment. The figure in the chair tilted its head, its grin faltering. "Interesting," it said softly. Then everything went black. When the darkness lifted, I was on my back, staring at an endless expanse of gray sky. The oppressive hum was gone, replaced by an eerie, unnatural silence. My first thought was of Rachel. I scrambled to my feet, my head spinning, and found her lying a few feet away, unconscious but breathing. "Rachel!" I shook her shoulder gently, relief washing over me when she stirred and groaned. "What happened?" she murmured, her voice hoarse. "Where are we?" I looked around. We were no longer in Silent Town. The streets, the buildings, the suffocating presence of the place had vanished. Instead, we stood in a barren field of gray ash that stretched endlessly in all directions. The air was cold, the sky flat and lifeless. "I don't know," I said, "but we're not there anymore." Rachel sat up, her eyes darting around the desolate landscape. Are we dead?" "No," I said firmly, though I wasn't entirely sure. "We're alive. We just need to figure out where we are and how to get home." We began walking, though it felt pointless. The ash crunched beneath our feet, leaving faint impressions that were quickly swallowed by the shifting ground. There were no landmarks, no sun, no sense of time or direction. Just the endless gray. "What if we're still in Silent Town?" Rachel said, her voice trembling. "What if this is just another trick?" I didn't answer. I couldn't shake the feeling that she might be right. The silence was unnerving, pressing down on us like a weight. And then we saw it. a figure in the distance standing perfectly still. "Do you see that?" Rachel whispered, gripping my arm. "Yeah," I said, my throat dry. "Stay behind me." As we approached, the figure came into focus. It was a man, dressed in a tattered suit, his face pale and gaunt. He stood motionless, staring at something we couldn't see. "Hello," I called out cautiously. The man didn't respond. As we got closer, I realized his eyes were fixed on the ground in front of him. He was standing at the edge of a massive pit, its depths shrouded in darkness. Rachel and I exchanged a glance before inching closer. "What's down there?" Rachel asked, peering into the void. The man finally spoke, his voice a hollow rasp. "Everything." The pit seemed to pulse, its edges shifting like a living thing. The man turned to us, his hollow eyes locking onto mine. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "It's not your time." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart pounding. He gestured toward the pit. "This is the end. For those who belong. But you don't." Rachel stepped forward, her voice desperate. "How do we leave? How do we get out of here?" The man's expression didn't change. "You must remember," he said. "Remember what brought you here. The truth will set you free." Before we could ask him anything else, the ground beneath his feet crumbled, and he fell silently into the pit. Rachel screamed, but there was no sound of impact, no sign he had ever been there. "What does he mean, remember?" Rachel asked, her voice trembling. I shook my head, trying to think. "I don't know. The car breaking down? The diner? The house." "The house?" Rachel repeated, her eyes widening. "That woman. She said something about forgetting, about being part of the town." Pieces of the puzzle began to click together in my mind. "The photos," I said. "The tourists. They were people who came to Silent Town and never left. It's like the town traps you, makes you part of it." "But why us?" Rachel asked. "What did we do?" I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that we couldn't let the town claim us. Not like it had claimed the others. As we stood at the edge of the pit, the whispers returned. They were faint at first, like the rustling of leaves, but they grew louder with each passing second. "Stay. You belong here. It's easier if you don't fight." "No," I said through gritted teeth. "We're not staying. We don't belong here." The ground beneath us began to tremble, and the pit seemed to expand, its edges creeping closer. Rachel grabbed my hand, her grip tight. "What do we do?" she cried. "Remember," I said, trying to focus. "We have to remember who we are. What's real." The whispers grew deafening, overlapping into a cacophony of voices. Images flashed through my mind. The road trip, the car breaking down, the diner, the house, the mirrors, and then something else. A memory buried deep, one I hadn't thought of in years. It was a summer afternoon years ago. Rachel and I were on a different trip, driving through winding mountain roads. We'd been laughing, arguing over the radio, not paying attention to the road. And then, the crash. The screech of tires, the shattering of glass. The feeling of weightlessness as the car tumbled off the edge. "Oh my God!" I whispered, the memory hitting me like a punch to the gut. "Rachel, we didn't make it." Her eyes filled with tears as the realization dawned on her. "No," she said, shaking her head. "That can't be true. We're here. We're alive." "Are we?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Or is this where we ended up?" The pit was inches away now, the ground crumbling beneath our feet. The whispers were relentless, urging us to give in, to let go. But instead of fear, I felt a strange sense of clarity. If this was the end, if Silent Town was some kind of limbo, then the only way out was to confront it. "We don't belong here," I said loudly, my voice cutting through the noise. "This isn't our place." Rachel looked at me, her tears glistening. "What do we do?" I squeezed her hand. "We let go." She nodded, and together, we stepped forward, into the pit. The darkness swallowed us whole, and for a moment, there was nothing. When I opened my eyes, I was lying in a hospital bed. The harsh fluorescent lights stung my eyes, and the beeping of monitors filled the air. Rachel was beside me, her hand in mine, her face pale but alive. "You're awake," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Where are we?" I asked, my throat dry. "The hospital," she said. "They said we were lucky. The crash, it was bad, but we made it." I looked into her eyes, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt a glimmer of hope. Silent Town was gone. We were alive, and we had a second chance.